Are you crazy if you talk to yourself? No. Look at that. Easy answer. We'll dive into that a little bit more with this video, which is from an article from Psychology Today titled Say It Loud. And it is written by Robert N. Kraft and specifically focused on talking to oneself, as mentioned. And it's not really specific about internal commentary or external dialogue. It kind of lumps them both into the same one. But the question here from a lot of people is this generally okay? I don't think the article fully goes into this topic, but we have learned that some people do not have an inner dialogue, but that doesn't mean you don't talk to yourself. I think the biggest thing you look at with this is socialization. A lot of people find it weird if you're walking around talking to yourself and there's no one around. It just looks weird. It's one of those weird things that everyone does it, but it's weird if you do it in front of people, which I don't think is inherently wrong. Going to the bathroom is one of those things. I'd rather not talk about it to everyone or do it in front of people. So there's nothing wrong with the privacy of certain actions. But the question of, is it normal and is it okay? Yeah, in this writer talks about having each semester, one of his class periods, one of his classes, he has his students spend a day not speaking at all. And prior to the assignment, most of them are concerned about, well, how am I going to navigate work or how am I going to navigate my partner? That's their biggest concerns. But according to him, his biggest feedback that he actually ends up getting from people is that the hardest part was not talking to themselves out loud. That was actually the surprisingly more difficult part of this. He also goes on to talk about how journaling is socially acceptable and even encouraged, that we tell people that, and it's actually a form of self-communication. The main difference that I will give to that, which is not a criticism, is it's a different part of your brain that's working when you're writing. So thoughts, verbal language, and writing all actually activate different parts of your brain. So whenever you're trying to work through something or get an idea figured out, it's actually really healthy to think about it, talk about it, and write about it, because your brain will process it in different ways. So, not an exact one-to-one there, but yeah, it's true that is more socially acceptable, is writing to oneself versus talking to oneself. I think mostly, though, that's because, again, the privacy issue. I don't actually think people find it. I genuinely don't believe most people find it weird that you talk to yourself. I think they find it weird when you're doing it in public, because that means you're pulling everyone in. When you're writing to yourself, even in public, you're excluding people. But when you're talking to yourself, even if you're like, well, I'm not talking to you, you are still doing that. You're pulling it in, just like the type of person who's listening to a YouTube video too loud in public or talking to their family on speaker, and then someone addresses it and they get mad. You're including everyone. It's not your conversation or video anymore. It's everyone. So your public behavior is an invitation for other people's experience, and they might not like that. So, or they might just find it weird, and that's okay. It's not that you're talking to yourself. It's not that you're talking on the phone. It's not that you're watching a YouTube video. It's that you're doing it in public around other people. I think we all see what I'm saying here. So we'll get into more of the nitty-gritty, or the fun part of this article, which is the 7 reasons to talk to ourselves. Why should you do it? So the first reason here being, it helps us learn new material. So the example that he gives in this article is focused around specifically medics, and it showed that talking aloud promoted the development of clinical reasoning skills while also increasing satisfaction with learning those skills. Again, this article doesn't talk about it, but it's going to answer a lot of this. Talking is a different part of your brain than thinking or singing, for that matter. Talking is complex in how you've Broca's area and Wernicke's area and all these other things that are activating to make language work in terms of mental processing, which is why sometimes people can think thoughts and not say the words they want, or why someone with a stutter, they're not stuttering in their head. It's coming out. There's so much happening when you speak in your brain. It's really complex and really cool. So yeah, it's going to be a different experience. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It's going to be different when you're speaking it versus just sitting there doing it. So, I agree with that. It's going to help you learn more if you can speak. One of my personal criteria for whether or not I know something is how well I can teach it. So I often talk to my wife about things I'm learning, or friends. And then I try as often as I can to teach people educational things I learned. So these YouTube videos are part of that. Any new clinical thing I'm learning, trying to describe it to not usually clients first, but maybe other therapists, business trainings that I'm doing. We're talking about them and ironing them out with language. So yeah, no surprise there. Number 2, it offers guidance during complex activities. So the discussion here is around, you can kind of narrate yourself as you're maybe building a desk or a chair, or just experiencing a complex task. That speaking out loud can help guide. I actually think, again, what you're doing is you're recruiting more of your brain power towards the object at hand, so it increases focus. It doesn't really give a lot of reasoning behind this step. It also, article mentions it provides live feedback, but you have to cognitively choose that. It's not just like talking gives you feedback. So yeah, I understand it more from the perspective of you're just choosing to narrate, therefore focus more on the task at hand. So item 3, it gives us time to process disquieting or novel experiences. The example here is a hike. And actually, I can't speak much to this. It makes me more curious to go try it. But he mentions people traveling alone or engaging in activities such as hiking find that talking aloud to themselves in novel environments makes those environments more understandable, while also providing self-reinforcement, self-management, and social assessment. Yeah, I don't have much to say about that. I've never really tried talking to myself for that reason. I talk to myself a lot in quiet scenarios. I would on a hike, but it would probably just be observational. I'm the type of person to point out a tree or an insect or talk to an animal or an insect or something like that. So, yeah. So that's a thought as well. Item 4, it improves performance. So the idea here being that it helps us execute upcoming activities more effectively. And he uses basketball players as an example, that they perform faster and better after talking through their moves out loud. That's interesting. And it also includes positive self-talk. So we know that positive self-talk increases motivation and overall performance because you feel encouraged. That's why people hype themselves up. Again, we're tying it back around. Your speech is a different part of your brain. So if you're talking through the task you're going to do, your brain is recruiting more for the task. Makes sense. Number 5 is it helps us process past events. I don't even need to read that to go on a whole positive tangent about that. This is why when we do trauma work, we speak it a lot of the time, and we speak it chronologically a lot of the time, because we put the events in order. We verbally frame reality in its proper form of, this is the awful thing that happened. We're going to address it and work through it instead of fragmenting it and pretending like some of it's not there. And of course, I just said traumatizing. He uses things like, an awkward social interaction or a frustrating circumstance, a disappointing performance. So, he's using lighter stress things, but regardless, if something negative happens to you, being able to talk about it out loud afterwards can be really helpful. Talk to yourself in the car, but probably more so talking to someone you trust about it and just saying, I'm bummed out because this happened or this didn't go the way I wanted and this is how I feel, but being honest about that's helpful. Number 6, it helps us monitor our internal dialogue. So negative self-talk can be monitored through more external conversation. I'm extrapolating here, but we can often be more critical in our head than we might be externally. Not all the time and not everyone, but that can happen. So when we make that negative self-talk more obvious, it's easier to call out and potentially correct. So it gives us more room to swap it with affirmative self-talk and keep the negative under control, because we're just aware of what we're saying. And as humans, we tend to care more about what comes out of our mouth than what we think. Finally, I almost said 7, it promotes self-distancing. We're getting a little bit more therapeutic with the languaging that's to follow, specifically internal family systems, IFS language, and just general and somewhat psychoanalytic as well, understanding self. But the idea here being, we speak to ourselves in 2 forms almost. So for me to say, I am annoyed that this is happening, a way to distance is to say, why are you annoyed at this, Ryan? And the idea there is that it splits part of your mind a little bit, and not in an unhealthy or crazy way, but it says, I am not the emotion. This experience is a part of me, but I'm not going to choose to fully identify with the experience. I'm going to acknowledge it. And so sometimes using you language can help separate that out, and we can make it more dialogical. So that's kind of the idea there. The article closes by just kind of re-emphasizing that split language of the argument that some people have that we are often two parts of ourselves. So words like self-talk, self-control was the other one that he uses, self-criticism, and focuses on the self-control piece of, if I have a desire to do something wrong, to maybe overindulge in a dessert, and I know my stomach's going to hurt, but I'm wanting to do that, I have to execute self-control, which is interesting because why wouldn't I always just be in line with myself? In my work, I separate brain and mind. And I don't really care how people separate it, but sometimes your brain wants something and your mind says no, or vice versa. But you have a part that knows better and a part that just wants, it just desires. And we get into this with the id, ego, and superego as well, and more Freudian psychoanalysis kind of work. But just on this scale, it is worth reflecting on. Sometimes that self-talk can help us have an actual conversation with our self, and maybe the more desiring or impulsive side versus the core sense of self that really does seek to honor and respect and love properly. So just something to think about. So if you are a big self-talker, let me know. And I'm curious what your experience with self-talk has been. If it's been shut down, if you're embarrassed by it, if you have found it helpful, I'd be curious. So yeah, that's about it. See ya.